Hello everyone, my name is Brennan Marr. That noise you're hearing is my ventilator, and welcome to Page Turners They Were Not, my Star Wars podcast. I wanted to share a few thoughts on the episodes of Maul Shadow Lord, episodes 5 and 6, which came out earlier this week. There's a lot to cover, so I just want to talk about a few things that stood out to me. So the Empire has arrived on Janix, and is definitely causing trouble. Now, last week I mentioned that the arrival of the Empire felt, to put it in a current political context, it felt like the arrival of ice in a city. It had that same level of terror, and we've seen what that's caused. And that a lot of people are living in fear right now. Now, the development of this show, Maul Shadow Lord, was probably taking place before the current events. But the parallels are definitely standing out to me. And I think part of that is the story of Star Wars is a tale as old as time. And tactics of authoritarianism are pretty much always the same. So the Empire shows up, and immediately the city is in lockdown, and paranoia is running rampant. Now, Randall Lawson wanted to keep this contained. He wanted the local law enforcement on Janix to deal with it. But Two Boots followed his directive and reported this to the Empire. Now, Two Boots, a droid, is not evil. He was following his programming. He was following his directive, his just default on what he should do. And in a way, this is kind of the downside of being lawful good. Meaning that if you're willing to obey the law to the letter, we see what happened as a result. Now, is Two Boots going to change his mind about this? I think so. But the problem being that he followed his programming and called the Empire. And this is something that even the chief of police didn't want to happen. And this is probably something we're seeing in American cities right now. The local law enforcement wants to deal with the problem. And somebody probably calls in ICE and they come in and cause a lot of trouble. Because we're talking about sort of the rule of law here. The Empire really plays by its own rules. And the same is true for parts of America, or any country where there's a group of people who don't follow the rule of law and just do whatever they think is right. Another comparison, I've been watching The Pit, and in season 2, there's an episode where two ICE agents show up with a woman that they are in the process of deporting. And she's been injured, and the doctors are checking her out. The implication is that the ICE agents injured her. We don't know that for sure, but that's the suspicion. But definitely we see in that episode that the ICE guys are not operating with any level of decency that you might typically see. I mean, we know that law enforcement, that police have done bad things. We know this. But this felt like another level of a group that has that doesn't really answer to anybody. It's kind of like the Empire. They don't really answer to anyone, so they can do whatever they want, which is a problem. But nonetheless, I could not help but notice those parallels. And I think Two Boots eventually will do something that might save the day in as much as it can be saved. Because an interesting little bit is when the Imperial commander tells Two Boots to take off his two boots. Basically saying, you're a droid, you shouldn't be wearing those. It's an attempt to squash individualism. And maybe that's the moment when Two Boots realizes that he made a mistake in following his protocol. Yet again, Lawson proves to be the good guy that we all want to root for, the good cop. He's just doing his job, not doing it out of maliciousness, but out of a desire to uphold the rule of law. Interesting that his name is Lawson. Master Iko Diodaki continues to be an incredible character with a very old-fashioned Zen Jedi attitude. And the lightsaber battles in this episode, particularly the 6th episode, are maybe some of the best in animation. Devon is, yet again, just such a compelling character, and the idea that, being this teenager, she doesn't really have the same worldview that Daki does. And I think Maul senses the fact that because Devon is young, he can kind of mold her into the weapon that he wants her to be. And Maul takes a back seat in these episodes. He's hiding in the shadows, pulling the strings. He is not actively at the forefront. Until he throws down with Merrick. Merrick was terrific in that interrogation scene, where Merrick comes out of the shadows in that medieval style armor. Very, very menacing and frightening. Now, the police chief, we don't know what happened to her. We know that she was interrogated. Lawson notices there are scratch marks on the desk in the interrogation room. I suspect that Merrick was trying to read the chief's mind. Similar to what we see Kylo Ren do to Poe Dameron. And I imagine that whatever it was, that's where the scratch marks come from, was the intensity of him trying to read her mind. And all we know from the Imperial Commander is that the chief was reassigned permanently. That sounds like code to me. For either she's dead or got sent to a prison somewhere. Maybe an early prison on Narkina 5? So, now, the reason I think they let Lawson go is pretty clear. He goes back to his apartment, and his son Riley has let Master Daki and Devon hide out in their apartment. Which I think Lawson immediately knows is a bad idea. But doesn't have time to react as Merrick shows up at the door. And cuts it down. Didn't waste much time. I think they let Lawson go because they figured that was going to happen. That he would lead them to their prey. And of course we get this great chase scene, which is great. Riley, I think, might end up becoming more of an important character in this story than I thought he would be initially. And I do like the fun interaction between him and Devon. Very, very teenage interaction of, she doesn't know much about sports, but he does. And just some funny little interactions between them. But where Riley fits into this story, I don't know yet. But it would be interesting to see. The last thing I want to touch on, really quickly, is Riley's mother. We know that Lawson and her are divorced. Or separated, or something like that. And we know that she works for the Empire. Like I said a couple weeks ago, I can't help but think that they split because of that. Because she might have chosen the Empire, and Lawson probably couldn't stand that. That's what I think. But the scene with her talking to Riley is a great scene because the things that she says are things that we have heard in the real world. She tells Riley, the Empire is there for your protection. Okay. And she also basically says, well, you haven't done anything wrong, so you don't need to worry. We are hearing people say that nowadays. But those of you listening who might be too young, after 9/11, the Patriot Act was passed. The Patriot Act gave the government the right to detain people who might have seemed suspicious without the proper rule of law. If someone was suspected of being an Islamic terrorist, because at the time that's what people were paranoid about, if someone was suspected of that, they could be detained without the rule of law, completely bypassing the way justice works in the United States. And the reason I say Islamic terrorist is because at the time, there was a paranoia of people working under Osama bin Laden or the Al-Qaeda terrorist group. They claimed to be Muslim, but they weren't really. But nonetheless, the rhetoric that you heard in the United States was, they're only doing this for our protection. And I heard somebody say this in a college class. If you haven't done anything wrong, you don't need to worry. Well, I think that we've seen enough evidence in the last 25 years that just being innocent doesn't guarantee anything. I'm sure that many of these people that ICE is detaining are, in fact, I think most of them are innocent people. And so the argument that if you haven't done anything wrong, you don't need to worry, is not an argument that holds water. And I think it was interesting to hear Riley's mom using these justifications. Now, based on what we see of her, I don't think she's one of those hardliner, emotionless Imperials. She's not one of those standing like a military officer type people. She seems more like a civilian. And obviously she cares about her son very much. But some of the excuses she's throwing out are excuses we've heard before. and we'll probably hear again, and excuses that put her in allegiance with the Empire. Basically, as they say, she drank the Kool-Aid. She accepted the propaganda. So there's a lot going on in these episodes that unfortunately mirror the real world. This is Andor in animation in many ways. So anyhow, those were a few thoughts I wanted to point out. And I am so excited with the show, and I cannot wait to see where we go next. My name is Brendan Marr. That noise you hear is my ventilator. Thank you for tuning in to Page Turners They Were Not, my Star Wars podcast. May the Force be with you.